Dynasty Show. I am Chad. Welcome to the Footballguys Dynasty Show. I am Chad Parsons, and this is the year to fade quarterbacks in rookie drafts. Joe Burrow is the 101 in most Superflex leagues, which have been drafted since the NFL draft, and Tua Tagovailoa. It's top 4, top 5 of Superflex rookie drafts. Even Justin Herbert, he's going in the first round, top 10 in a lot of Superflex drafts. But what does that mean? It means you need to fade the position. It's not like last year. This is not Kyler Murray. This is not the same running back class from last year. It's not the same wide receiver class from 2019. And if you're thinking you're going to get the quick flip, if you think you're going to get the Oracle at quarterback, that is not likely. Historically, we're looking at, even with a top overall draft pick in the NFL draft, like Mr. Joe Burrow, who's going to transform the Bengals, we're talking about a low-level QB2 in Superflex leagues. Historically in year 1. What does year 2 mean? It's like a mid quarterback 2. The probabilities are not good that you're going to hit on a game changer at the position, even from number 1 overall in the NFL draft. And even picks 2 through 10. Do you think that's going to be improved at all? It is not. 2 through 10 in the first year, less than a 10% hit rate to find a quarterback 1. So we have a elite blue chip running back class, and you're going to say no over and over again in the top 5, 6, 7 of your league to take Joe Burrow and to take Tua Tagovailoa in your Superflex rookie drafts. It is a catastrophic mistake, and it's mainly due to the talent that is surrounding said players and not intrinsic to Joe Burrow and Tua Tagovailoa themselves. So we can get into Jalen Hurts. We can talk about Justin Herbert. They are in risky ranges as well with their surrounding other skill position players.
Yeah, and I'm Jordan McNamara, and this is the year of perhaps the greatest rookie class, at least since 2008, in terms of guys that qualify as being rookie picks in the first round. When you sort of look at the average threshold for first round picks across positions, this year there are 14 of them that would qualify as being an above average historical first round pick in a start 1 quarterback league, which is where we have the data going back to. To give you a comparison, last year only 6. So it's better by, it is the best class since that 2008 threshold in terms of having 14 guys above that first round line. So a lot of opportunities this year to build a strong team, to avoid some of the landmines that you were discussing, to avoid pedigree reaches, and to just avoid making big mistakes in your draft. Just simply, this is the year to capitalize and really build a big team. So, I mean, I think what you said and the combination of those two things gives you a lot of opportunities this year.
Yeah, and for Joe Burrow, again, this is nothing having to do with the historic season he had for LSU. This has nothing to do with the great track outside of injury concerns, outside of potential longevity concerns with Tua Tagovailoa. This has specifically to do with the metric profiles, the safety, and while it wasn't top 10 or even first round for a majority of those top running backs, it has to do with their top elite metric profiles as well as their workhorse-like projections. And I think what's going to throw people off, especially at the top of Superflex boards, is the fact that there is ambiguity with their landing spots. The fact that there isn't that clear-cut Josh Jacobs walk into a lead role. No one is really going to stop them. There are reasons to be concerned with every single one of them not being a lock and loaded week 1 starter. And yet people will pivot, mistakenly so, in my opinion, to go towards the quarterback because they will be a starter. Well, guess what? Tua is not a guaranteed week 1 starter. Joe Burrow may not get the week 1 start, but even that, you're talking about redraft things. You're talking about even, I want to have a winning record in September or whenever week 1, those first 3-4 games are of the first season, you're drafting a rookie, which is very short-sighted and the exact opposite of thinking like a long-term general manager in your dynasty leagues. You're building from the top down and you want to have quality depth, but also you want that pop potential. You want to have some potential to get a first round startup pick or a rising value, a rising asset relatively early. And running back historically gives you that opportunity with an injury by midseason. I always think back to a clear-cut example is Nick Chubb being blocked by Carlos Hyde.
Mhm.
And now it sounds like a punchline. Now it sounds laughable to think that. And what did they do? It was such an overt changing of the guard by midseason. Carlos Hyde wasn't even on the team anymore. He was traded. He wasn't even on the Browns by midseason, by the fantasy stretch run of year one. So Nick Chubb ran with that job, and it wasn't in the opening month of the season. So that's an example. And I also wanted to go through the fact that who have been the quarterback ones in the last 20, 25 years in terms of top picks. It's been Peyton Manning, Cam Newton, Andrew Luck, and Kyler Murray. One of them, Peyton Manning, is a diabolical passer. The other three were plus, if not elite level runners. That is the fast track. That is the cheat code to getting a quarterback one initially. A quarterback that isn't super refined as a passer, but can run around enough to amplify their fantasy production. And while they figure it out, Cam Newton is still trying to figure it out as a passer. That's probably never going to occur, but he's gotten by as one of the best runners in NFL history from the position. And Andrew Luck was a blend of both of those things. Kyler Murray, we'll see about the diabolical passer part, but he can be, outside of Lamar Jackson, one of the top runners in the entire NFL. So something to keep in mind. Joe Burrow doesn't really fit that big time runner, high level, top 2, 3, 4 in the NFL runner at the position. So that kind of puts you into the subset. He needs to be an elite, diabolically accurate, and facilitator of fantasy points passer. So you're really pinpointing it into that one subset, which is a tall and historically rare bet to make.
Yeah, and I mean, almost you could say of the guys that have the higher range of outcomes at the quarterback position this year, in terms of maybe being the top rookie in terms of scoring, as well as the lowest like long-term floor, it might be Justin Herbert because of what he adds with his ability on the ground. So I'm sort of with you. One other thing that you noted that I just want to close the loop on is the waiting on running back thing. Is the waiting on, when you see guys have that narrative who would qualify as being top 3 picks in a normal class, but go into a quote block situation. And you brought up Nick Chubb. Another one was Joe Mixon a couple of years ago, where he was blocked by, quote blocked in his situation to start. And then by midseason, he came on. And what you'll notice in some of our advanced metrics that we use in WARP and AWARP in particular, which is adjusted wins over replacement player, and measures basically the true value or the true utility, the true games that a player actually adds for your team. The difference between running backs that go in the top 3 picks of rookie drafts and that go in picks 4 through 6 is no different. And so what you see is in that AWARP metric, which is the true impact a player makes. And I think the reason for that is because you get that discount. You get a little bit of that discount in terms of guys, quote, sliding because of block situation, when in reality, they're very much the same profiles and long-term profile the same. So what you're getting in terms of a month or 2 month, maybe a little bit of a murky situation, you're getting a discount on that when they're about equal in the long term. So I think that and I haven't seen it this year. I mean, it's a little bit, I thought it would happen to J.K. Dobbins, but it hasn't yet. I mean, that was the person that I thought would slide a little bit in terms of where he goes in rookie drafts because of situation. But he is right there between Swift and Akers. So I thought that he would be the running back 5 if we were going to see that, but we haven't really yet. I've seen him at running back 4 ahead of Akers in the drafts that I'm tracking. So I think that's a thing to watch. And maybe this year it'll be a little bit different because we won't have OTAs and all those sorts of narratives coming out of camps. But I think that's something to watch over the next few weeks to months.
Yeah, and I wouldn't let round 2 pedigree from running backs really affect your thinking. We want round 1. Ideally, we'd like, Todd Gurley, Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, the types that go top 5, top 10 in the draft. And you would see, I actually asked Gil Brandt about this before the NFL draft on Twitter, and he mentioned, this is not a talent problem. This is not the running back position is not important to NFL teams or the construction of offenses anymore. It is a look at the draft, and specifically the things we were talking about when we were doing a live show during the first two nights of the draft was that just the needs aren't there. Where is that first spot? So even if you say there's 3-4 running backs and man, they are first round quality this year, that really wasn't in the cards. And a lot of that was situational of these teams. First of all, it's one of the youngest in terms of cores of the average age of starting running backs in the NFL around the league. There's just not a lot of teams that are looking, man, I've got an older running back, or I've got nobody I really have confidence in. Let me go get a guy like Josh Jacobs last year. That was not the case this year. And even, a lot of people earmarked Miami and said, oh, they were the team that didn't take a running back of note. So you sit there and you say, there's not a lot of need. There's a huge talent pool of wide receivers. There's also a talent pool of offensive linemen, defensive players in general. So everyone's going to gravitate towards those positions until they run out. And then you saw the stark shift on day 2, specifically in the second round, and they all start to go. Even some players, Cam Akers, a lot of projections were later round 3. Well, that didn't happen. He didn't even make it out of the second round. So you see that the talent will eventually catch up. The NFL usually is pretty market efficient, even though a lot of people, want to fire away and say, these certain general managers don't do a great job, or these teams always, do well at this position or not well. Generally, things even out over time in terms of probabilities, and great drafts, weak drafts that take years to kind of evaluate once we get removed from it. But a lot of the year 1 hit rate to find top 24 running backs is not very different between round 1 and round 2. And so that's why, things do shift long term, and you do have more stability with round 1 running backs. But initially, especially in the first 12 to 18 months of ownership, which let's be real, as a dynasty GM, you're drafting a player and you can have the longest term view that you want. With I'm investing in this player, I'm going to own them their whole career. The odds are you won't. The odds are that you're going to be continually evaluating, what do I think of the player and what does the market, and is this an opportunity to exploit by adding additional shares in my other leagues where I wasn't able to acquire them in rookie drafts, or does the market value them higher than I do and it's a time to sell? Even if that's a player 8 months, 12 months, 16 months ago, I drafted and was bullish on, have things changed? We're constantly reevaluating. And so you really can't look in this view of, I'm going to buy this player, I'm going to own this player from the outset in my rookie draft. And for 3-4 years, it's almost like you have blinders on. We're human. We're going to keep reevaluating. And honestly, that's a healthy thing to do, of saying, where do I sit with a player versus the market? So we want a player, running back, you get clarity. You get clarity very early on. And I think about wide receiver and especially some quarterbacks, you can go 2-3 seasons and really not have full clarity on what has happened and what will happen.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I don't know about your reaction to the draft as we were sitting there. You and I were talking together for 2 full nights, and I went to bed. I woke up the next morning, and then it kind of really dawned on me how great the class had turned out through 3 rounds. And if you had told me, like, coming into the night, like, listen, AJ Dillon's going to go, right around 60 overall, I would have been like, I don't think that at all. I would have thought that there was if you had given me the odds of he was going to go at 60 or he was going to go at 110, like, I would have much more taken him at 110. And something that you and I talked about, and I think it's a big time implication in this class, is that once that happened, the floodgates opened up. And what we thought was a tier that was going to develop in day 3, so in round 4, round 5, it just came pouring open in round 3. And that difference between round 3 and round 4, that tier break across days, that's a big deal. And so when you look at guys like, and I think you have to think about this in rookie drafts too. So when you think about guys like Zach Moss, or and compare them to guys like Anthony McFarland, who it went in round 4, historically, that's a pretty big drop in terms of hit rate. So you have to, if you're going to make that decision, what I would consider cross days, particularly at the running back position, but even more so really at receiver. But when you sort of think about when you're stacking up your board and thinking about players, when you're going to make a drop across days of the NFL draft, you have to think really hard about taking the player that went later and instead of the player that went earlier. And you have to have really good reasons and really good convictions. Not to say that that's the wrong decision, but as a general matter, like, you should start from there. And I think that's a really simple way to do it. But I never really thought we would get into the situation where we would have, 8, 9, 10 guys going off the board in terms of the first 2 days, the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. And that's just going to create a really ripe situation. I think you're going to have a couple of guys that went on day 2 end up as round 3 rookie picks, just in terms of ADP. That's a historical abnormality. You're going to see, I think, at least one wide receiver that went in the first round of the NFL draft go in round 2 of rookie ADP. There's only been 5 in the past 12 years that have done that. So that's going to be where you're going to, I'm guessing you're going to probably see, top 10 quarterbacks go in late round 3 of rookie drafts. Like, those are indications of really good classes, because those things they're uncommon and only happen when there's a rich talent pool. So I think that's a big thing this year. Are there any players that you have seen? I know you've been tracking some drafts. Are there any players you've seen at particular price points that you're pretty cautious of or would warn the market on?
Yeah, and I love how measured that question is. We really haven't. The interesting thing is, so again, we were talking live for 8-9 hours on Thursday and Friday night. We kind of went our separate ways, and honestly, I went into a bubble, and I get into the data cave, as I call it, over the weekend, just doing so many things that are beyond the normal. Let's just I have 50 names, and let's kind of drag and drop and get some rookie semblance going. There's a lot more to it, but yeah, that. Kind of having more assessment on that. This is the year that it is. There's 2 kinds of years, and I always reference the Devontae Booker year, which is the year where you're artificially pushing up guys that they have no business being in the first round of rookie drafts, because there's just not enough bodies. You've referenced it before. Like, now the cup overfloweth. The cup it has too many names to fit. And especially in Superflex, names that might normally be 110, 111 of a class, you're sitting at 204, 205, and they're available to you. So this is more of I call it the fish in the barrel year, because you have, generally actually 2014 was the case too, because I remember that the takeaway was, and literally if you wanted one tagline for that year, and honestly, like, sitting there in the moment, I didn't include Bishop Sankey, which was actually one of the horrific names to include. But it was among that really, just so much fruit falling from that wide receiver tree in 2014. And we compare every class. Is it 2014 or is it not? And honestly, this is the closest one we've had since. That year, it was anybody but Marquise Lee. Twitter wasn't a super huge thing in 2014, at least for me. But if there was a hashtag, it'd be hashtag anyone but Marquise Lee. And so this is the year that it's fish in the barrel, and it's more about shading, and there's less horrific you cannot make that pick type stuff going on, is what I would say. So it's a lot easier. It's a lot more paint by number of just, well, here's ranges, here's players, and you have preferences within tiers, I think is a good way to put it. So back to what you asked, which is very specific of, is there a player you're seeing the price point that, and so I'll say this, that I think, especially in the late first and early second round. So I'll pick a point right there. I still think that Henry Ruggs is a tough pick from what I've observed. And yes, he was the first wide receiver off the board, but I think the shading between, we knew the top 3, 4, 5, 6 wide receivers were all going to go in a 10, 15, 18 pick span. That's relatively small. No one went 2 overall in the draft. We didn't have Larry Fitzgerald this year. We had a lot of really good wide receivers that were consensusly first round viewed, going through the process. And sure enough, the first three that people expected off the board were the first three, different order. I'm sure Dallas didn't think they were going to go look at CeeDee Lamb. So they go, yes, we'll take that. Thank you. Yes. We'll take him. We'll figure it out. Dak Prescott is sending you, a box of cookies. He's very pleased with what they did. Well, actually just what Jerry Jones did, I guess. But anyway, Henry Ruggs, he's walking into a situation where it's pretty wide open for a number one role. And is he up to that task? He is also paired with Derek Carr. So Derek Carr, again, I like him, but let's not pretend like he has a runway of the next 3 to 5 years that almost no matter how it goes, he'll have a job. And I know that's a high bar and very few quarterbacks have that period. But the point is he doesn't have much allegiance. They got Marcus Mariota, and this is almost a Tennessee situation from last year. Mm-hmm. So they could easily just pull the trigger and switch, and go a different direction mid-season if this thing is not going the direction they want, specifically with Derek Carr. So they also got one of the most interesting picks in the draft, in my opinion, which is Bryan Edwards going day 2. Same draft class, and one of those players that could he go day 2? Could he go day 3? He ends up firmly going day 2 without a workout, but having a very nice profile. I don't think people should be surprised if this thing, like, you need to give a puncher's chance that Bryan Edwards 2 years from now is actually the wide receiver 1 there. So I think Henry Ruggs, considering he's going in Superflex right around that 1-2 edge in terms of round, while being the first receiver off the board, this is about where he was going. Late first kind of feels, pre-draft. It hasn't really moved too much. And yet he goes to an open depth chart. He goes as the first receiver, and that still doesn't really help him. I think that means something. So to me, he's a guy that, as I go through my 30, 40 rookie drafts over the next 30 plus days, I just don't see myself in that zone pulling that trigger much at all, just because of surrounding options. But he still has that moniker of boom bust metrically. And I mean, could you look silly betting against a guy that runs 4.2x and could literally light the league on fire within the right range of outcomes? You could absolutely look that way. But to me, it's aligning like it's a little more of a danger spot early on. And again, there's not many. This is me quibbling. You're getting the top 10. You're getting the first wide receiver off the board in the top 15. And you're getting that in the late first as a contending team. You could just sit there at 112 and just take Henry Ruggs. That's a great year for me to pick it apart and say that's one that stands out to me.
Yeah, when you have to go that far down the board to sort of quibble about wide receiver 1 going as wide receiver 5. I mean, it's almost like last year where wide receiver 1 went wide receiver 4 or 5 in rookie drafts. It's pretty abnormal. The thing I really think about with Ruggs is he's one of 5 guys since 2003 to not crack 20% market share or 20% dominator rating in a year and go in the first round of the draft. I mean, it's just a rare, and none of those guys have hit. So it's just and when you compare them to some of the other guys that you're getting in that range, even the good, the quote, good day 2 or good round 2 picks, I mean, you sort of, at that point, you almost want to break ties against him as well. Though I don't think, if you're sitting at 203, 204, something like that, Ruggs is probably gone. It's going to make that decision for you. But if you're sort of sitting there against him and against, whether it's T. Higgins or, some of the other day 2 wide receivers in that range, I think it's a more interesting conversation than you would historically think for a round 1 wide receiver.
Yeah. I do want to mention, now that we're halfway through the show or so, I do want to mention, so we mentioned at the top, I am Chad Parsons and he is Jordan McNamara. We've done hundreds of shows together in these host and co-host, co-captain chairs. And we're happy. We're so happy and thrilled to bring our dynasty acumen and information to the podcasting and the show world of Football Guys. And Jordan is new. He is been upgraded, elevated, and promoted to a staff writer position this off season. I've been here a few years, and the dynasty shows and kind of diving into strategy is where we live and breathe, both as GMs in our own leagues. And what we always say is be the best dynasty GM you can possibly be, and then be an analyst and share that knowledge that you gain through your study, research, and also implementing in your leagues. So also want to mention listening, if you're watching this, but it's also, most of this is an audio medium, go over and sign up at Football Guys for their free daily email. It is back up and running. It's running almost every month of the year. There's a slight break after the Super Bowl, but every single day, this is like as daily of a routine, and Jordan can relate well, as a cup of coffee. You have your routine of where you get it, where do you drink it, what's your routine, timetable. It's going to be in your inbox every single morning. And it's such a resource, because even if you track stuff, even if you're reading the football news, this comes to your inbox, and it's almost a fail safe. Invariably, it's like there'll be something in there you missed, and maybe you need to take action as a dynasty GM. And they have the takeaways. If you miss something, a signing, a trade, just some news from across the NFL. So it's an invaluable resource. And again, what's the key word? Free. Just sign up and you're going to start getting it. It's going to be part of your routine every single day. So I can't say enough, whether you're just starting out, whether you play a little redraft, play a ton of dynasty, anything in between, there is value to be had. And again, it just starts to get some of the information, the value from footballguys.com if you sign up for that email.
Plus you get a daily email from Joe. I mean, it's a good way to start your day.
Exactly. Cup of Joe. Actually, that's actually what we should be calling it. Cup of Joe. I wanted to ask Jordan, because I think the interesting part, and I actually have one key central quarterback for this topic, is the key dynasty quarterbacks, because it feels like there's some juggernaut skill position teams out there. And whether it's a quarterback we don't know about, a quarterback we hope is going to hang on, maybe it's a changing of the guard quarterback, where there's a lot dynasty value-wise and dynasty production-wise riding on these quarterbacks. And I wanted to start with my fixture, my central candidate here, Mr. Drew Lock, because look at what the Broncos have done. They have built it like they have a Toys R Us gift card, and they are 7 years old and about ready to have some fun in the mall, because they have surrounded him. First of all, Courtland Sutton had a career year to date last season. They drafted Noah Fant in the first round. That's not enough, though. Look what they did just in this draft alone. Jerry Jeudy, yes, we'll take what was generally consensus the first wide receiver off the board. Then, KJ Hamler could be the next version of John Brown, Deshaun Jackson, or again, just a speed vertical element. Then what do? They get one of the most lauded high-end workout tight ends that we've seen in recent memory, in Albert Aquabunum, who slides inexplicably to day 3. This is unbelievable. They're top 5 to 6, in addition to getting Melvin Gordon almost as a luxury in free agency. Like, we have some money to spend. Let's upgrade this. We think we can upgrade the running back position as well. It all centers on Drew Lock. It all centers on a second-year quarterback that has started 5 games and was a second-round pick. I'll get into second-round picks, NFL draft-wise for quarterbacks not being exactly the land of luxury of where you want to invest. And I know, Jordan, we've discussed a lot about these checkpoints for quarterbacks that you shouldn't feel too great until they actually start doing it. I mean, there's so many undervalued mid-career, back half of their career, veteran dynasty quarterbacks that you can just hitch your wagon to. The Kirk Cousins of the world. Now we get Dak Prescott, or Matt Ryan is a great example of they've been there, done that. They've seen everything. And you know what? Drew Lock hasn't seen almost anything on a different scale. And yet look at all the dynasty assets that now hang, at least short term, in his balance. And is he really going to be the facilitator, the point guard, this John Stockton to their Karl Malone, and produce all that value and distribute it accordingly? I'm very skeptical. My historical eye is skeptical. My small sample size spidey sense is really going off on alert. And yet, don't they feel a little bit like they could be moving into a direction like the 2019 Browns, of saying they can't possibly not achieve this high strata of success, because look at on paper how great they are, but you still have to go out on the field and do it.
Yeah, and I think the key thing in this whole thing is Locke's pedigree. And when you look at, when you go back and look, and I've done research on this in terms of just how many starts you get for quarterbacks that get inside a top 12 versus guys that don't get inside a top 12 seasonal finish. And the guys that in the second round, the quarterbacks that do not produce a top 12 season finish with 19.7 starts in their NFL career, which is be about the end of the season for Drew Lock. So, right, this is really, while people think this might be a long-term building process, if he flunks this, expect them to address the position. I don't think this is a long-term investment in Drew Lock. This is a long-term investment in an offense to be determined on who's going to man the ship 18, 24, 36 months from now. Because if Drew Lock flops, they're probably in a position to draft someone again next year. And let's not pretend they spent a lot of capital on him. I think, didn't they pass on him with like their first second round pick last year? I think he was like their second round pick, if memory serves. So this isn't someone that they have, spent a ton on or have a ton invested in. They have a ton invested around him. And I think that's two different things. And so while you brought up, I think you rightly bring up Cleveland and what they did last year, they're two different arcs in terms of Baker Mayfield, really, really high pedigree. Drew Lock, for an NFL starting quarterback, not really that high. And you expect about 22% of the quarterbacks that are drafted in round 2 to be top 12 starters. And so you got to be really, really careful with that cost.
Yeah, and some of the recent quote unquote successes out of day 2, round 2, guys like Jimmy Garoppolo. And again, once he finally starts, he still doesn't have a quarterback one season. A lot of people project him as way better than he actually is. And you can see him, he might be closer in actuality to that. We're trying to hide him in San Francisco. We're trying to actually minimize his impact on games. We were saying last year, what happens if, I wanted to see in the playoffs, what happens if they get punched in the mouth? What if they are down by 14 and it's all on Garoppolo's shoulders to lead them back in a game where it's all on him, distribute, and you got to push the ball and be aggressive and not in Mahomes fashion? How does that look? We always said, his head thinks he can make all the throws, and he just frankly can't. Derek Carr is probably a great example of, and this kind of goes back to, what's a success and what isn't a success. I mean, Derek Carr has been a massively successful round 2 pedigreed quarterback, and yet he's leveled off. He had that one close to MVP type season, but fantasy wise, not running around, he was still kind of locked in, no pun intended, to QB2 land. So, those type of examples, Colin Kaepernick obviously had his concerns as a passer, but he had the rushing code to really boost his fantasy production. Guys like Deshaun Kaiser. Again, it just overall, I think the measured approach, and I love what you mentioned, which is they could go right back to the well. There are actually NFL free agents right now that, not saying that Denver is going to go that way, that direction, by week 1 or anything like that. But there's going to be a quick fuse, because if this doesn't work, the blame is going to fall on Drew Lock of not facilitating it. And one thing that was kind of alarming to me, that may be a limiting element here, because they have so much now added speed, vertical element, big playability. It really wasn't there last year. He was good inside of 10 yards, and beyond that, pushing the ball, he was one of the weakest in the NFL by a lot of measures. And if you're talking about Drew Lock, who's not going to be overly mobile, he's not going to be, 300 plus rushing yards. He was averaging, I think it was 5-6 yards per game last year. He really wasn't moving. He was relatively static in the pocket. And you talk about someone that didn't excel with the deep ball either. It's going to be a very interesting situation with such a low yards per attempt. Maybe things change. Maybe part of it was weapons, but the weapons were fine last year. Yes, they're better now, but that small sample size and the whole extrapolating, here's the prorated, 16 game schedule. That's a very dangerous game. Or my favorite, rabbit hole that people go down, the stock line that I think gets people in trouble, is every first year player improves to their second year. Every second year player, every young player, well, they're bound to get better. Actually, maybe defenses are getting better, and especially with the quarterback position. And we say that all the time on a number of different platforms. What we say is, just you can take the easy softball, right? Take the mid-career quarterback, probably not super sexy, probably not that huge name cachet of, say, Baker Mayfield last year. Kyler Murray qualifies, just assuming they're going to do it, assuming they're going to be Patrick Mahomes. And it just, if you don't, Lamar Jackson did it because of why? He ran for a historically high amount of touchdowns, as well as historically high unsustainable touchdown rate as a passer. And does anyone expect that to return? That is, we're talking you're checking two boxes that are so rare, and they come together in the perfect storm of a season. And I'm not saying Drew Lock is going to get to the high point of QB 5 or 3 or something like that in Dynasty ADP, where you're going to have to actually take him in drafts this offseason. But the point is, his stock is getting mighty hot. And I get it. The surrounding talent is there, but it all fixates on him. And if he's able to come through more than anything else. And like you said, with round 2, they're going to have no problem changing to something else, veteran or NFL draft wise. It was poised to be another quality quarterback year in 2021.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Did you see I did my inaugural Footballguys Dynasty rankings this week, and I started with quarterback, and I got right at quarterback 2.
Yes.
Dak Prescott.
Mr. Dak Prescott. And you know what? This is a great point to make. Talk about weapons overload, right? But talk about a quarterback who has actually done it. He's done it for a while now. So he is Mr. Underrated. Now you gave him CD Lamb, a luxury pick, a total Dallas pick, right? Of just going for the glamour, local kid in terms of that area of the country. It could have been quarterback, wide receiver 1 on a lot of people's boards. And now you add that to Amari Cooper. Michael Gallup, to me, is so underrated. And now he's going to get lost in the limelight of those two big names. And you got Zeke Elliott, and Dak Prescott runs. I recap for Football Guys Dallas every week, and it seems like if it's 3rd and 6 in the red zone, he is absolutely 3 or 4. It's almost like some of that second level data where it's like coming up in the big moments. Dak Prescott, just my spidey sense in those moments on 3rd and 6, if he beats in the pocket and pumps once, he's going to run, and he's probably going to score. He scores 4, 5, 6 touchdowns seemingly a year. And those big moments, again, you got to cover the entire field, and he's not afraid to take off, and that just maximizes his value. And you say, what are you going to do? Come off of CD Lamb to try to spy Dak Prescott? No chance. So Dallas is like, doesn't it feel like the low-hanging fruit that Dallas is going to be one of the top elite blue chip offenses? They were kind of close before, but it seems like having 3 close to uncheckable receivers where you can only double one of them. It just seems like it's going to be near impossible to stop them outside of sacks and penalties.
I think the lost story of 2019 season is that Dallas had the number 1 offense in total yardage, and it didn't. Right, they disappointed. They underperformed what you would expect, considering how many points they scored versus how many points they gave up. Like all of those sort of advanced metrics, like they sort of got unlucky. But they were the best offense in terms of total yardage in the NFL last year. And you add to that CD Lamb, you add and Dak Prescott finished his quarterback 2 last year, did so with a pretty average touchdown rate. Right. Usually you see that touchdown rate get up for quarterback 2, 6-7%. He did it at 5. And so I actually went ahead and I just looked at the numbers because I wanted to see. I think Kyler Murray outscored Dak Prescott by 70 or 80 points last year. If you flip their touchdown rates and just gave each other their other one, Dak Prescott would have outscored Lamar Jackson by 200 points. And those things are pretty fluky year over year in terms of touchdown rates. And we see this all the time with bad bounces and missed tackles. And next thing you know, wide receiver reels off an 80-yard touchdown, right? Those things happen. So it is fluky and it shows up in the numbers. So I think when you're making a bet, that I took to finish that loop, I did take Prescott over Lamar Jackson because of a lot of those factors. I just think that there's danger in investing. We're playing a game going forward in terms of trying to get future value. Overpaying for past performance is one of the worst ways to capture that. So I thought that was a fun place to start my dynasty rankings career. And by the way, how do I trade you? I had the Chicago Bears last year and you had Dallas Cowboys. How do I trade you recaps?
I certainly have a more fun quarterback situation. But you know what? The Bears, not as much to cover. Nick Foles will make it fun, though. The touchdown rate for quarterbacks is definitely one of the most exploitable things, and one of the things you can quickly look at. Just dial in, and I used to look at that. Every single offseason, I would dive into it. And get super pumped to go through who are the guys that regressed. And followed the rule, and it's really 90 to 95% confidence. In terms of above a certain baseline, below a certain baseline. The big thing, obviously, with the low benchmark is, are they still going to have a job? If they were that poor in terms of touchdown rate, the team probably wasn't very good. Are they still going to have the allegiance to be the starter so that we have that static situation to lean on and bet on the following year? And then it's always those magical years. I go back, Aaron Rodgers had a magical year. Tom Brady, magical year. So you have to go through and say, even the greats of all time and the greats of recent memory can't repeat it. It's just so tough to have, 40, 45, 50 touchdowns, or like Lamar Jackson, lower volume, but higher just historically unsustainable touchdown rate. It's so difficult. But yet you look at, again, guys that keep humming along in their quarterback ones without that magical year, and you almost say it's bound to happen, right? If they have strong weapons, like you mentioned, the oblong bounces, the slip by defensive backs 3-4 times for long touchdowns over the course of the year that boosts them by 2, 3, 4 points per game and a handful of touchdowns beyond what they're already doing. The Dak Prescott does feel like that on that short list of, he's never had that strong season, and it's sort of that alignment is coming, especially with a defense that's up at, let's say it's being improved upon. It's an up and coming defense, which means it could be bad. It could be a lot of shootouts. It could be, these aren't going to be 17-10 games. They're going to have to score 30 plus, 35 plus, a lot to win the games that we think they're going to win. And that's actually good news for us trying to pile up fantasy points.
Same argument for Matt Ryan, right? I mean, the addition of Tom Brady to the division and some of the things that they're doing, and Atlanta's defense struggles. I mean, they bring in Todd Gurley, and those games are going to necessitate shootouts. And I just think, like, you look at him, and another person that had a down touchdown rate last year was actually Goff. And so you sort of just look for them to have some natural regression there. And I think there's some big opportunities, and their defense is struggles too. So I think you're getting some of these situations where you have some good offenses at some reduced costs in terms of quarterbacks right now that have pretty good upside for 2020, assuming it happens.
Absolutely. So I mentioned the Football Guys daily email. Jordan mentioned it in passing. Dynasty rankings are up and flowing. You can find his Dynasty rankings on the site. It's also redraft season. FFPC leagues, Dynasty leagues, they are drafting now. Football Guys Player Championship drafts are drafting now. You can find that on the contest menu of footballguys.com. You get a free $35 entry just for signing up. And they're drafting. They have drafts going on this week. But again, you can get in there and get an additional bonus team to get some action. And again, this is an audio primarily, but we do have a YouTube stream every single week. And Football Guys on YouTube, you can just search that term. There were the live NFL draft shows, the Audible, on the couch, this Dynasty show now. And Sigmund Bloom actually has a SIG section where it's 3, 4, 5 minute shows on small topics, news, bite-sized information. We'll call them nanobites, of information and news you need and analysis to help your fantasy teams. So those are all the things that you can do to support this show, whether it's, again, subscribing on your various podcast platforms and subscribing to the Football Guys channel on YouTube. And those things really help us out. Jordan is on Twitter at McNamara Dynasty. I am at Chad Parsons NFL. And again, you can find our content now that it's post-draft. This is rookie draft season for Dynasty GMs. So this is the time of year where, and again, we're going to talk a lot about rookies on this show. We're going to talk a lot about the changing landscape of Dynasty player value, because from now until the season, that is really where we live. Everything has changed to a large degree. We talked about how Dak Prescott, you get more weapons. We talk about the pressure on Drew Lock. We talked about having a strong take about the quarterback class within the scope of Superflex rookie drafts. All of these things are paramount decisions Dynasty GMs need to make for their teams. So until next week, good luck in your drafts and keep dominating your Dynasty leagues.